everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of City Council on this fourth day of August 2020. The meeting is called to order, and we have every single City Council member with us today, so we definitely have a quorum. We will start this morning's meeting with the Chaplain Prayer from Gary, Marcella Jenkins, and just to remind our audience, Gary and Marcella are husband and wife. So one of the reasons they don't have a mask on as you're watching this is they live together.
Amen.
Okay. Would you please lead us in prayer this morning?
Thank you. Thank you. To the mayor, the Honorable Brenda Gunner, the members of the San Angelo City Council, and the people we serve, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Will you join with me as I pray? Dear God, in the scriptures you have said that citizens ought to obey the governing authorities, since you have established those very authorities to promote peace and order and justice. Therefore, I pray that our mayor, the Honorable Brenda Gunner, the members of the San Angelo City Council, and the people we serve, I'm asking that you would graciously grant them wisdom to govern among the conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of welfare and true needs of our people, personal peace in their lives and joy in their tasks. I pray for the agenda set before our council today. Please give an assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live and work in and around our beloved city of San Angelo. I pray, Lord, that you protect San Angelo from the spread of the COVID virus as we turn and seek your face. Please heal those that have contracted the virus. Bring peace to those that have lost loved ones during this season. Let us be obedient to the guidelines that have been set by CDC, social distancing, wearing a face mask, and wash our hands. It is in your most blessed name of Jesus I pray. Amen.
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 Thank you, Marcella.
You're welcome.
Special instructions for our meeting. Members of council and staff should begin speaking by stating their full name and SMD position or role within the city. Today, we'll now move into public comment, and I'm going to start our public comment today with a proclamation. And the proclamation is concerning the El Paso shootings that happened, and the anniversary was yesterday. And so all of us mayors in West Texas have signed on to this proclamation. It reads as follows. Our city shares in the heartbreak of the events on August 3rd, 2019 in the city of El Paso, Texas. Yesterday, August 3rd, was the first anniversary of the senseless act resulting in the loss of lives and injuries to many, and should be remembered by honoring the victims. The event demonstrates the perseverance of the entire community of El Paso in its strength of courage, service to others, and hope. The one-year anniversary was a day of reflection and remembrance of each life lost, a time of reflection commemorating how the citizens and community came together in unity. The city of San Angelo, a part of West Texas, stands together to walk ahead as we continue the healing process, as we stand strong together to continue to provide safety and security for all. Now, therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim August 3rd, 2020 as El Paso Strong Day in San Angelo, Texas, and urge all citizens to stand behind the people and leadership of our sister West Texas City as we remember their lost loved ones, as we remember their lost loved ones and continue to heal and stand strong for a continued safe city. We call on all citizens to continue to carry El Paso and every person affected by this tragedy in their thoughts and prayers. In witness whereof, I hereunto set my hand and have caused the official seal of the City of San Angelo to be affixed this 4th day of August, 2020. Today, I also want to just review the numbers, the statistics for our COVID-19. We today cumulatively have had 2,421 positive cases. Of those, there have been total tests of 14,406 total tests and negative tests of 10,484. At this point, we only have 53 pending tests, which is the lowest number we've had in several weeks. We have had a total of 25 deaths at this point, and we have had released cases of 1,389. I continue to emphasize the age category that has the highest number of positive cases, and that is those who are in the age category of 20 to 29. So that's 573 cases of the 2,421 positive cases, making that about 24% of the total positive cases. Our positivity rate this past week was 24.3%, down from the 24.6% the week before. We still have a higher positivity rate than the entire state of Texas. The entire state of Texas as of last week was 17.3%, I believe. So we're at 24.3%. So we're still significantly higher than the state of Texas. So we still have work to do. And the biggest focus right now has to be on social distancing as it relates to large groups, or I should say, large groups continue to be our biggest problem. I am so proud of the citizens of San Angelo for their obeying the mask order. I'm very pleased when I am out and about, the number of people wearing masks. So I want to thank all the citizens for continuing to follow the mask order. But we must still continue to be diligent about social distancing and large groups. We believe strongly that those large groups is where we're continuing to get the largest impact of positive cases. So thank you to all you citizens who continue to report and talk to us about what's going on in the city of San Angelo, so we're more aware of what's happening and what is not happening. So thank you. With that, we will move into the consent agenda, and I'm going to start off by pulling items A and C from the consent agenda. Do I have any other items that council would like to pull from the consent agenda? With none, Billy, did you want to pull something?
Yes, I'm sorry I didn't unmute. Billy DeWitt, single member District 6. I was going to pull C, but I'd also like to pull F and G.
F and G. Okay. We will, I will take a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of items A, C, F, and G. May I have a motion for approval?
So moved. Billy DeWitt, single member District 6, Mayor.
Thank you, Bill. And a second by Lane Carter. All of those in favor of approving the consent agenda with the exception of items A, C, F, and G, may I please have a vote?
Aye. Aye.
Are there any nays? With no nays, we will accept the consent agenda as presented. Item A is consider approving the City Council July 21st, 2020 regular meeting and July 28th, 2020 budget workshop minutes. And I would like to read the following from Alan Prest. He says, I have a concern with the minutes not reflecting my public comment. Mayor Gunter read a public comment from Alan Prest, SMD1, regarding COVID-19. I would like to change those minutes from July 21st to clarify, and that the clarification will be as following. Mayor Gunter read a public comment from Alan Prest, SMD1, requesting public health officials present to City Council on COVID-19. With that, we will move into, let me go ahead and take a motion for approval of item A at this point. May I have that motion?
So moved.
So moved by
Second.
Lane, second by Tom Thompson. Those opposed to approving, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, wait a minute, you made a motion to approve, so I just asked for the negative votes. Lane.
Oh, I'm sorry. Aye. Aye to approve.
Okay. With all of the motion, with the motion passing 7-0, we will move on to item C. Item C is as follows. Consider awarding FD-01-20 EMS Billing and Collection Services to Emergicon LLC and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. And the public comment on item 5C is as follows. In 1997, the city of San Angelo outsourced the billing and collections of municipal ambulance fees. After a competitive bidding process, our firm, Business and Professional Service, was selected to perform these services. We have been the continuous contractor for the city through 2 additional requests for proposals. As a professional services contract, the lowest bid is not automatically awarded. Through every bidding process, other companies promise to collect more revenue for a lower fee. While we were saddened to not be selected as a preferred contractor, the chosen bidder's fee is significantly below industry averages. The true measure of results is the total net revenue to the city. This is a labor-intensive contract, and we question how collections can be maintained at this proposed fee. Without enough resources, a drop of less than 4% in collections will negate any perceived savings on the fee. The purpose of this email is to caution the city to protect itself from revenue loss. During negotiations, contract language should include collection guarantees and the ability to cancel the contract on short notice if results are not as promised. We have enjoyed our 20+ years business relationship with the city and wish you continued success. As always, we are available if you have any questions, concerns, or need our insight. And this was written from Tom McDonald, a non-resident, a former vendor, who is the president of Business and Professional Services. With that, Brian, would you like to talk us through this contract?
Morning, Mayor, Council, Fire Chief Brian Dunn. Our contract with Business Professional Services went out July 31st, and we had sent out an RFP and received 9 bids from different vendors for the billing of EMS services. So a committee went through all these bids, and we came out with Emergicon being the one that we thought was the best billing vendor. As far as that goes, I mean, we still need to negotiate with them. That's what we're asking for approval today. I don't know how much you want me to get into what we saw. There were several things in there about the way they build different things that we thought would be beneficial to the city.
What is our current rate of collections as a percent of total dollar amount?
The current rate from Business Professional Services is 10.4%.
And what are we asking for in the contract?
Can I talk about this, Teresa?
She said yes.
Okay. The one that we chose billing rate is 6%. They weren't the lowest. There was people below them too.
So to the challenge of that was presented in this comment, what would be our answer?
Well, my answer to that would be, from the bids that we got, Business and Professional Services was several percentage points above the rest of the bidders. So of the 9 bidders, they were the highest one out of all that. But that's not the sole reason. There's other things that this other company does in their collections that we think will collect more money for the city of San Angelo.
Since this is a professional service, can you talk briefly about some of those things? Because, you know, as you know, our selection is not based entirely on the money. It shouldn't be.
Well, and I don't know if I can or not. They had a bunch of those contracts had confidential stuff that said not to be put out. So I'm not sure how much of that I can. Just the way they build some things, we went over. So we had a list of references with each one of these. We called a bunch of these references to see how people were performing on what they said. The one that we chose, They said they, how do you want to put it? Under promised and over delivered is basically their terms. They said they ended up with more money than what those people told them that they would get. The other thing is with this company also, the only people that they bill for basically are municipal ambulance services such as us, as far as we could tell. That is their main customer base. So they were very familiar with the type of service that we run.
Do I have questions from council for Chief Dunn? Yes, Billy.
Billy DeWitt, Single Member District 6. Chief Dunn, what is the length of the contract?
So in the past, this is the third EMS contract that I've done as chief. Normally, we have a 3-year contract and we have 2 3-year extensions attached to it. It's how we've done it in the past, if both parties are agreeable to that. We also have provisions in that contract that if they are not performing, that we can get rid of them within like 30 days. So there's things built into the contract for non-performance. If they do not live up to what they said and our revenues are starting to go down, we can release them from that contract. And that's the same thing that's been in the contracts with business professional services also.
Did Chief Dunn, did any of the proposals include contract language about collection guarantees, that they guarantee they would collect a certain percent?
I do not remember seeing that, but I don't know how they can guarantee. That's almost like a financial advisor guaranteeing he's going to make you 8% on your money. I don't know if they can guarantee that. What you do is watch. We know how much we're collecting, and we know about how much we get off those runs. So we would be able to tell pretty quick if we're not collecting what we should be collecting.
And did I understand you to say a little bit earlier that you're still in negotiations?
We're asking for approval from council today to begin negotiations. We have an extension with business professional services to cover us until we get that negotiation done.
I do think that is an important point, that we do not have actually a contract at this point. Everything that we're talking about is terms that we anticipate we're going to be asking for in a contract, but it is a request to negotiate a contract.
Okay.
All right, so repeat again, based off of the dollar amount that exists in terms of collections, what is the typical percent of that total collections that we achieve?
Oh, I don't have that information in front of me. I know how much we pay them on the collections. I can tell you about how much we collected last year. It was in the $3.6 million range off EMS revenues. I do not have because there's so many numbers out there. You have net collections based off different categories such as private insurance, Medicaid, and all those variables affect that percentage as it comes in. My guess would be in the 60% total range, somewhere in there.
I think we need to have the ability to look at what we collect as a net amount, everything combined in a net amount. I think that's an important number for us to have. I also want to know how that would 60% collection, if that's about the number, how that relates to other cities and in terms of collections, because 60% collection doesn't sound overwhelmingly great.
So I don't know that that's the standard that they use, Mayor. A lot of the standards they use is dollars per transport, because you have many things in there. So we may charge $600 for a transport, but Medicare may only pay $400, and you can't go after those people. So on something like that, you might get 66%. Then you have people without insurance that pay nothing. So the overall is hard to measure. What a lot of them measure off now of is the dollars you collect per transport.
Mayor?
Yes, Teresa.
This item, because it is a contract negotiation, we do have the ability to discuss it today in an executive session. So if you're interested in more information from the chief, perhaps he could gather that and we could discuss it after all the other items in executive. It would also allow you all to ask a little more direct questions regarding the contract and negotiations, because as the chief hinted at earlier, since we are just in a negotiation, there's a lot of things we don't want to discuss in open session.
Well, what I would say is I don't think it'll benefit us today to take this into executive session, because I think we need to do some homework on some statistics so we better understand. So my guess is that we should have an executive session next council meeting to better discuss some of the items that you don't feel comfortable discussing publicly today, just so we're better informed. You're asking us to give you permission to negotiate a contract. And where I think we're agreed that we want you to negotiate, but I think when we want to approve it down the road, we need to better understand what we're approving in terms of expectations. Are we all right? So with that, what we will do, go ahead, Chief Dunn.
I can't give you an answer on the net collections. I mean, we looked at a stack of proposals that was 12 to 14 inches high, so I can't remember all the numbers off that. But what I can tell you is I believe our dollars per ambulance transport right now are about $360 per transport that we collect. They were, I think that the amount that they said that they would probably collect for us was $441 or somewhere in that range for their collections per transport.
Well, we will, I will ask for a motion to approve them to continue to negotiate on this contract with the stipulation that we will in executive session have an opportunity to get into the weeds, deeper into the weeds statistically. Because I know that sooner or later this is, we're going to have a conversation about ambulance fees as a part of the budget for 2020, 2021. So I think it's relevant that we better understand this negotiation and the dollars before we're asked to approve the budget for ambulance fees. So I'm going to ask for a motion to approve that we allow continued negotiations on this contract. May I have that motion?
Billy DeWitt, single member District 6. I make that motion, Mayor.
Thank you.
Second, Mayor.
Tommy was going to second that. With that, I'm going to ask for nays only. Is there anyone opposed to us allowing them to continue with this negotiation? Nays only. With no negatives, all support from 7 council members. You may continue to negotiate on that contract, Chief Dunn.
Thank you.
And we will discuss it in executive session in detail. Thank you. We will move to item F. Consider resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute a professional services agreement with the Texas Coalition of Affordable Power, TCAP, and a commercial services agreement with GEXA Energy for power to be provided after January 1, 2023. Nolan, you're on.
Good morning, Mayor, Council, Mr. Valenzuela, Nolan Sosa, Purchasing Manager. How are you all this morning?
Good, thank you.
This agreement, I guess I'll start by opening it up. Councilwoman DeWitt, did you have any questions for me this morning, ma'am?
Well, I had one. Do we currently have an agreement with TCAP?
Yes, ma'am. So we do have a current agreement with TCAP, but it is a fixed price agreement. This action is going to be carrying forward into the year beginning January 1st, 2023. They're modifying the way that they procure their electricity. So they're offering their members, and city as a member, the option to do what's called strategic hedging, where they procure 1 month of electricity 2 years in advance. And that process will begin January 1st of 2021. Cities have to pass a resolution saying that they wish to participate in this program before October 1st, because they're going to begin that procurement process in January of 2021 for the period beginning January 1st of 2023, since they're procuring 2 years in advance to help us better forecast our energy costs and to achieve economies of scale. By buying with more cities, we'll have more buying power and we'll be able to buy down on our energy costs. In the background, I kind of discussed a little bit about cities' potential savings, but under this different pricing structure, we're looking at saving about $85,000 per year on our electric utility.
So Nolan, if they start the negotiation for January 1st, 2023 and January 2021, so they negotiate a price each month, 2 years down the road?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so for instance, when we go into January 2021, our rate is about 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So if they're able to negotiate for 2023, 3 cents per kilowatt hour, that is a locked in amount for January 2023.
Absolutely.
So each month in 21, we will know what the rate will be in 23.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so then if it's not less than 3.5%, what do we do?
City retains the option under this agreement to move back to a fixed price structure if we find that the strategic hedging program isn't working in our favor. But because we're jumping on this vehicle, I should say, with over 160 other members, we're going to be able to probably achieve prices, Councilwoman DeWitt, that are far lower than what we're getting now.
All right, so now in the information, it looks like GEXA Energy, is that included in this or are they separate?
So it is included in this action item, but that's a good question to clarify. There's two different agreements. There's the professional services agreement with the Texas Coalition of Affordable Power, TCAP, which is a group that procures the electricity on behalf of the city as city's electric utility agent. So that's one agreement. And then the second agreement with GEXA Energy. GEXA Energy is your retail electric provider, just like you might get electricity from Reliant Energy, for instance. GEXA would be city's retail electric provider. And we need agreements in place for both.
Okay, okay. Now, I think I know the answer to this question, but I would like for you to speak to it, Nolan. With this contract, what would be the benefit, if any, to the citizens of San Angelo?
Well, you know, the benefit to the citizens really comes from city's cost savings. If we can achieve a savings of $85,000 a year in our electric utility, that's $85,000 that the city can devote to another initiative that can better, you know, impact the public. Because right now, you know, us paying our electric bills is really an internal operating expense, and we can devote those funds to another initiative that perhaps yields a more direct public benefit.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions, Mayor. I move to approve item F on the consent agenda.
Billy, I'm going to wait a minute. I've got a couple of questions, and so does Lucy. So I'm going to hold that motion and then finish the questions. Lucy, you had a question? We can't hear you, Lucy. You need to unmute.
No, Mayor, I didn't have a question. I was just going to second Billy's motion.
Okay, well, let's wait 1 minute. Okay, on the
Yes.
2023, how long is that, would that price be guaranteed? Because you talked about this new 2023 contract. So talk to me about the terms.
So the base term of the agreement, Mayor, would be for 5 years. So we would be under this type of procurement structure for a 5-year period. And we would be able to forecast out, as we're having discussions with budget, for instance, looking forward to what our electric utility is for the fiscal year beginning 2023. We're going to be able to say, these are our costs for these months. And really the most economic way to do that, Mayor, is to say, we have a year of data for 2023. We should have that year completed in December of 2021. We will know what the rate is going to be for December of 2023. We can take that year of electric utility data, we can divide that by 12, and we can get an average cost per kilowatt hour. Because we're procuring 1 month at a time, there's going to be some ebb and flow and some rise and fall in that rate. And so the best way to forecast that is to say, this is the average, and this is what we're going to use to budget for a year's worth of the electric utility. And that will be how we can calculate what that rate is and what the potential cost savings for the city will be each year out.
I'm surprised that we haven't had a situation concerning this in the past. It would seem like we, because of so many other things that we do, we join with other cities in a major group to negotiate and buy at combined rates of combined cities. So why is it we're just now looking at this kind of a purchasing contract?
Well, city has been a member of TCAP for quite some time, Mayor. It's just they're changing the way that they buy the electricity. So we've actually been on a collective agreement with these 160 other cities. It's just been a fixed price model, much like what you probably have in your home or in your businesses. It's a model that you know what your price per kilowatt hour is based on your consumption. This is a little bit of a unique way of buying electricity that we're able to take advantage of because we're a municipality and we have stronger buying power. Because while you might, consume a couple of thousand kilowatt hours a month, city, consumed 29 million last year. So we're a very attractive customer for an electric provider. And when we partner with, large cities or cities our size, and you multiply that times 160, it induces them to offer better prices than, say, an end consumer could, receive. And so we're not necessarily doing any type of new initiative. We've been doing this for a while, but we're just going to take advantage of a new buying mechanism, a different way of buying that electricity.
All right, repeat that number in terms of what's the dollar amount we spend on electricity every year as a city?
Yes, ma'am. So the last fiscal year that we have a full year of data from, 10/1 of 18 to 9/30 of 19, we spent $2.8 million on electricity.
So quite honestly, the $85,000 savings, which is terrific, isn't a very big percentage of our bill.
No, ma'am.
So go ahead.
A lot of those numbers, Mayor, are really driven by the volatility in the energy market in general. Whenever you have economic conditions, say like a COVID crisis happen, that drives the cost of the electric utility down, it's great, but at the same time, there's other conditions that cause that price to increase. And so we're not going to yield just an astronomical 10 or 11% difference, because that market is heavily saturated, and we're also subject to the monopoly of the retail electric provider, Gsb. So, while I wish that the savings would be 4 or 5%, 85,000 on 2.8 million, while not substantial, is still, 85,000 that we can devote to another initiative.
And I appreciate the $85,000 savings, but I just repeat, it's not a very big percent of our total electricity bill. So I would hope that we could find a way to figure out how to reduce the electricity bill of $2.8 million. It's a big number.
Absolutely. Cities already, internally, we're having discussions about different behavioral changes that we can do within the organization to bite down on some of our consumption. And hopefully that will yield additional savings for us in addition to this program. So
do we have a plan as a city that says these are the following 5 key points that what we're going to do over the next X amount of years or months to help save on electricity? What is that game plan?
It's in the very early stages right now, Mayor, but I know that one of the things that we've discussed is taking a look at the, hours that we operate and what we can do to cut off, say, the heating or air conditioning system, or, when, the city employees leave the office suite for whatever reason, cutting those lights off and just doing measures like that, things that we do in our own homes and applying that on an organizational level might yield some cost savings, but it's in the very preliminary stages, so I don't want to misspeak at this time.
All right, well, what I think we need to do is be prepared to have you come back and talk to us about the game plan for reducing the $2.8 million from just our actions that we can take internally. And with
Absolutely.
that, Daniel.
Mayor, if I may, this is definitely an item of discussion since we're having our general fund budget discussion next week. This is actually an item that we can touch up on as well and have a little bit more discussion as far as what we believe could be a savings to the city as well. So we can kind of go into a little more detail in.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
With that, I had a motion from Billy and a second by Lucy. Let's take a vote. All of those who say nay, speak up now. With no one opposing, we will accept the resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute a professional services agreement with TCAP and a commercial services agreement with Gen X Energy Powers. So let's negotiate hard and let's find some bigger savings. All right, with that, we'll move on to item G, consider approving an amendment to the concession agreement between the city of San Angelo and San Angelo Post and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. And Carl
Yes.
White is on.
Yes, Carl White, Parks and Recreation Director, Councilmember DeWitt. We do have a quick presentation we can go through if you have any questions, or we can try to answer questions now.
Okay.
Which would you prefer?
Why don't we go ahead and give the presentation and then see what questions might exist after the presentation.
We'll do. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, stop. Go to the next slide, please. So what we're looking at doing is an amendment to the existing agreement, which was approved at the June 7, 2016 meeting. The initial term of that expires June 7, 2021. In the amendment, we're looking at a new term that would have the agreement expire June 7, 2026. In this amendment, we're looking at updating the list of events that have non-exclusive concession rights, adding the Fort Concho's En Plein Air event, and bringing the total accepted events to 8. In this, there's 8 separate events at which the city's concessionaire would not have the exclusive right to serve that event. And I can list those events if you wish. Looking at updating the list of products and prices, that was last updated in 2016 with one exception. The cost of hot dogs went up 25 cents. And then looking at some non-substantive administrative updates, including the place of payment, adding a clause that states if the concessionaire can't provide the service, that the city can secure service from another vendor, which does not happen very often at all. But we would like that clause in there in case it does happen. And then also accepting methods of payment by customers and to include credit cards. Next slide, please. San Angelo Host, the current concessionaire, pays the city 20% of its gross revenues from the sale of food and non-alcoholic beverages and 25% from its sale of alcoholic beverages. These rates were approved in September of 2008. The last fiscal year, San Angelo Host paid the city about $80,000. I do need to point out that the total amount that did get paid to the city is about double that. The $80,000 is what the city retained. The other amount is what passed through the city to go back to the San Angelo Stock Show Rodeo Association for their event, the city's largest event. And prior to contracting the San Angelo Host, the city did operate its own concessions, and San Angelo Host has proven to be a much better choice to provide that service. So a question may be, why now? We're about a year out from the end of the term of this agreement. As you know, the last 5 months have been pretty brutal in terms of events. San Angelo Host has virtually had no revenue the last 5 months. They do have some upcoming financial commitments in terms of renewing the insurance purchasing new equipment and ongoing loans they have to pay off. And they do wish to have some security of continuity with the city to continue to provide service. I believe that's it in terms of the presentation.
Okay,
Try to
Billy,
answer any questions.
Billy, you had some questions?
Well, he answered, Carl, thank you. You answered most of my questions as you went through the presentation, but can you explain to me in a little bit more depth when you say we collected about twice as much as the $80,000, but it was a pass-through? I didn't quite get that.
Yes, the city, the San Angelo host pays to the city all the amounts from the events. We have a separate agreement with the San Angelo Stock Show Rodeo Association for their events at the Coliseum, which is a huge event. And the money that San Angelo host earns from that event, basically the city doesn't retain that because of our agreement with the Rodeo Association. They get all the concession revenue from that event under our agreement with them. And they pay us a separate flat fee for their event, the Rodeo
Okay, so
Association.
that's just like $80,000 from this rodeo is just a pass-through.
Essentially, yes.
Thank you.
San Angelo host pays the city, and then under our agreement, we send that money to the Rodeo Association.
Okay.
Thompson, would you like to comment on anything on this item?
Oh, sure. And I have 10 years experience working with San Angelo host. It's always been great. But Billy, there's also a contract which y'all approved here a while back. The Stock Show and Rodeo pays a very sizable amount in excess of what this payment was back to the city. So I don't want you to think that those funds go through there, that there's not another way that those aren't getting back to the city. And I will say this for dealing with Carlo, we have a lot of people with San Angelo host that question, they have to provide service no matter what event or how many you're having there. And also a good part that they do, they provide a waiver of subrogation, which is a very good legal protection for the city and for people that utilize them, which if you aren't familiar with that, it provides you some very long-term protection that other people don't. And that's kind of my question for some of these non-exclusive for events that have chosen not to go with San Angelo host. Teresa, do we have the protection that a waiver of subrogation from them, much like what we require San Angelo host to provide for us?
Teresa, you need to unmute.
Carl, that might be a better question for you to answer regarding what kind of contract we do with somebody who does not use San Angelo host in an event.
They must have a certificate of insurance for their event, which does.
But it is a different contract than what we generally use with San Angelo.
Yes.
And why do we allow a couple events to not use San Angelo host?
Those have primarily been traditional events that have been, most of which have been ongoing before we had an agreement with San Angelo host. That's the reason they were traditional events hosted in the city.
Well, that's not true because Enclair Air has not been, it's in its 6 years, so it's relatively new compared to many of those other events.
That is correct. And some have requested to be exempted.
I would think, Carl, if I could step in, maybe Brenda, with On Plain Air, I think a lot of those beverages are provided to them or donated outside the realm that wouldn't require Carlo to be there. So if somebody provides wine or something like that, not requiring a beverage license, that may lead to some of that. I'm not for sure on that, but that might be a little bit of input there.
I just want to make sure that, I think Carlo's done an incredible job on his contract and delivering services. And I know it takes a lot to keep all those people available and ready for all the multiple events that he does. It's bigger than what most people understand in terms of organization and staffing. So I want to make sure that this contract is a win-win for the city, for organizations, but also for Carlo. So he tends to be very easy to work with, and I want to make sure we're not stepping on any toes here in this negotiation, that it's a win-win. Okay, with that, Do I have a motion for approval?
Harry
Mayor.
Thomas, Single Member District 3, I move to approve as presented.
A second?
Billy DeWitt, Single Member District 6. I second that motion.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Anybody opposed to approving this amendment to the concession agreement? With none opposed, it passes 7-0. That concludes the consent agenda for today's meeting, so we will move into the regular agenda. Item 6A, consider approving an amendment to the infill incentive program to include relocation of decent and structurally sound existing homes to neighborhoods targeted for revitalization. And I have Bob Salas on.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Bob Salas, Neighborhood and Family Services Director. We're here this morning to get approval to amend the infill incentive program to include relocation of decent and structurally sound existing homes into our neighborhoods targeted for revitalization. Currently, the infill incentive program incentivizes developers with up to $5,000 for construction of new homes or for commercial projects in empowerment zones. Now, these relocated units would undergo an inspection by staff to ensure that the units are safe and decent and do not present a lead-based paint hazard. To provide additional information on the concept, I'd like to introduce Elisa Denny, who has a short presentation.
Good morning, Mayor Gunter. Good morning, City Council. My name is Elisa Denny. I'm a resident here in the city of San Angelo, and I've been working with Mr. Bob Salas to incorporate my project for placing single-family homes within the areas that are considered for the infill incentive program. I realize this is a bit of a novel project, but I think that once you hear my suggestions, you'll be pleased and you'll want to include us in that program. So if I may, I'd like to present a short PowerPoint. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. Bear with me as I bring up my slideshow. Okay, so I was made aware of the infill incentive program when I was attending a city council meeting approximately 1 year ago, and it was a new concept to me. I was not familiar with it. When I entered into my idea for this development, I had no idea that something of this nature existed. What has arisen since then is that I have partnered with Baptist Retirement Community, and they have 8 or more single-family homes that they wish to relocate. They will be reestablishing those homes in their existing sites, but at this point in time, they are willing to partner with me so that I can relocate those homes. These homes are single-family homes, as I mentioned, pier and beam construction, not modular, and just briefly I'll review the facts. So I have ownership of 8.5 acres within the infill incentive program qualifying area. These are buildable lots that I have during the time of my ownership for the last 9 months, cleaned up, fenced. It's a large particular parcel, including 2 separate entities that I purchased it from, one of which being the Catholic Diocese, and the other part being a piece that I purchased from the Habitat for Humanity. So having said that, when I purchased these lots, it was my idea that there were, basically 8.5 acres of undeveloped land, not platted, no utilities, being underutilized right by downtown. So we're actually located at the corner of Rio Concho Drive, extending over to the street called Irene, which is east of there, encompassing 3 city blocks. I would like to develop this area. I am a private citizen. I do not have any financial backing. but I know that I can provide much needed housing for the city of San Angelo, and I can provide a tax revenue base in terms of property taxes for units that are not presently being taxed by the city of San Angelo, because Baptist Retirement Community is actually a nonprofit, as you all know. The area where I'm asking for your help and support is based upon the fact that although I will not be constructing these single-family homes from the beginning, there are several reasons that it will benefit the city of San Angelo. Number one, the time frame for having a house set on site and able to be inhabited, as far as the permits are allowing, is 90 days. So what does that mean to you guys? It means that it's an immediate tax revenue generator versus, let's say I were attempting to site build 8 family homes in the city of San Angelo. It would be substantially greater for me to undertake that project. I am working with SKG Engineering. We have a site plan that's been established. I have established utilities to that location. I have established tremendous improvements to the site. And I think that there are several people on this call that will support me in the fact that this was a terribly underdeveloped area, you know, more or less, for lack of a better word, kind of a dump site. I personally have removed over 8 loads of trash because it basically was a dumping ground, and it's a beautiful piece of property. And so I would ask that you include me in the infill incentive program so that I can take advantage of unused money in an area where people are not actively developing. And in terms of the caliber of the homes, I want to let you know that they are far better, okay, or at least in keeping, and I would be very confident to say far better than the existing homes in the area. My homes are presently 1,000 to 2,000 square feet, not including attached garages. And these homes are something that can really rejuvenate this area. They can bring almost what I'll call a pocket neighborhood for those that are familiar, and start a trend as it relates to downtown San Angelo. I think everyone on this call is aware of the beauty and the amount of activity that is starting to take place in the parks downtown, which are adjacent to my property just across the river. And I believe that this opportunity would afford the city of San Angelo not only tax revenue in terms of property taxes, but also I know because of the study that was provided and presented at City Council when I've been present, that we do have a dramatic home shortage for single family homes in the city of San Angelo. I am hoping to be a solution here for everybody. The community, the tax base, and also local business owners, because my location is approximately 2 minutes from downtown San Angelo as far as our historic area. I think that this is a win-win for everybody, and once I began to discuss this with Bob, I felt like this was a perfect fit for this project. So in terms of any questions that you may have, I'm happy to answer those. I am very confident that everyone on this call would be extremely pleased with the quality of the homes that I will be moving in. Now, in reference to the contrast between site-built homes and the homes that I'll be providing. So although the interiors of these homes, which are not new, obviously, they're built between 1970 and 1990. The caliber in terms of finishes and size and quality, including the exteriors, which will be 100% completely redone. So what I would like you to take into consideration is, although I am bringing in, I'll call the shells, okay, of these homes, I am also going to be 100% refurbishing those homes in terms of their exterior, meaning they will be either brick or stucco. They're compliant to everything with city code and will be pre-inspected by planning and zoning prior to their move. And I can't express to you how much I believe that everyone on this call will be extremely impressed with what I have to offer in terms of bringing this solution. As to my qualifications, I am just a private resident, as I mentioned, not affiliated with any entity, but I do have a 30-year background in marketing and advertising, and I will be able to market in that area in a very successful manner, providing a cost per square foot to the community that will be unprecedented, as well as just the quality and feel that I know everyone on this call wants to provide for downtown San Angelo. This is just a little sample of the actual site itself. I thought it might help for you guys to actually see what we were talking about. The community is gated, as I mentioned, and right now it is located across the street from subsidized housing, which is an apartment building called the River Point Apartments. But you will see that it is my vision to provide a rural feel while in the city of San Angelo. We would like to provide a community garden and also a park-like setting in terms of common areas for people. And anyone that would like to review my site plan, I'm happy for you to do that. Very excited, and have modeled this after a community similar in the city of Austin, Texas, which took an undeveloped or abandoned airport facility and refurbished it into something kind of a utopic almost type of setting, and yet maintaining the cost effectiveness to make it affordable for people that want to live in the city of San Angelo. This is just a little bit of my marketing that I want to implement. I don't want to bore you with all of it, but basically our takeaway is that we're country living right downtown. So I would ask that council would consider my request. What I am personally devoting to this in terms of finances is far more substantial than the subsidy that I'm requesting, but it certainly would help expedite the process, and it also would impress the fact that the city of San Angelo is supportive of the infill program, despite anything that might make it look non-traditional, because I think that everyone on this call would agree that we have to think outside the box in order to move forward. So thank you very much. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Mayor Harry Thomas, single member District 3.
Yes, Harry?
But I just make a comment. This particular area has really been blighted for a number of years. As Elisa said, it's really been a dumping ground. I get calls all the time about people dumping in that particular area. So I really think the concept is kind of out of the box, as she said. I like the idea that we're going to take existing homes from one part of the community and put them in another part that is now, really not being utilized. And so from my perspective, I like the concept.
My two questions are the following. One, I want to make sure, because the infill program is all about building up tax base, I want to make sure that not only the property, it's the plat itself, the land is taxed, but the building also will be taxed, not a nonprofit tax on the building itself.
Thank you, Mayor Gunter. No, it will be 100% single family homes and is platted as such. And so, as I said, with our turnaround time of relocating each home and having it ready to be able to be moved into, in all honesty, we are allowed 3 months by planning and zoning. However, we're looking actually at about 1 month as it relates to my plan and process, and as I've proven can take place in my past developments. So just to answer your question, I'm in no way affiliated with any nonprofit. I just fortunately was able to partner with Baptist Memorial It's a bird's nest on the ground. I get it. But it does take a substantial amount of revenue to relocate those homes, obviously, and to incorporate utilities where utilities were not previously accessible. I've been working for about 1 year with the city of San Angelo in terms of engineering and planning and zoning to make this happen. And it has not been, it's not been extremely easy or overnight, but we are at the point where I would love the opportunity to take advantage of this program so that I can subsidize the project and invest in things like beautiful landscaping, nicer finishes, right? That type of thing. 100% single family homes, which will generate immediate tax revenue for the city of San Angelo in terms of property taxes. The entire development, which is slated to be as many as 16 homes, would be completed within 12 months. That means that immediately the city will be able to generate revenue.
Okay, so you talk about being affiliated with Baptist Memorial. So are these houses currently owned by Baptist Memorial and you're buying them from Baptist Memorial?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. They are scheduled to be either demolished or moved. And so I would prefer that they're moved into the city of San Angelo so that we can capitalize on that versus some other city or outside of the city limits being able to capitalize on that. It's much easier to relocate them into rural settings, but that's not my vision. My vision for this project is to relocate them convenient to downtown, and just to kind of piggyback on what was just said. I personally have taken control of that area in terms of removing trash and debris, in terms of the scale that no one on this call would imagine. And I hate to use the word police, but I've had to personally police the area, working with the Department of Natural Resources and the engineers of San Angelo to make it safe. Now we're in a situation where it's ready to be developed and move forward. And I realize, although an unconventional suggestion, the caliber, as I said, of the homes that'll be relocated will be far higher in terms of taxable value and assessment. So when we talk about that, just to give you an idea, between $150,000 and $250,000 homes. So not something that's necessarily in keeping with what's there presently, which, as we know, is nothing. But when we talk about the surrounding areas.
Well, these, because you are working with Bob Solis, my question is this a project that is income verified, or is it going to be traditional mortgage lending purchases?
I would say that that's up for discussion. That's not a conversation that Bob and I have had. So I'll let him comment on that.
Mayor, it's not a requirement to do income qualifications for any of the incentive programs. But although we could do that, that'd be up to Ms. Denny.
I would be willing to work with the city mayor for whichever direction that we felt would be the most suitable.
I'm fine either way. I just want to make sure we're discussing the vision,
everything
in the big picture of this project. So I'm not stipulating one thing or preference.
Yes, ma'am.
The other necessary, just trying to get a picture of what you're doing. Obviously,
yes, ma'am.
Housing is one of the important parts of our strategy. I think it's terrific that you've gone out and cleaned up this piece of real estate. I can't wait to leave city council meeting this morning and drive out there and take a look at it.
I wish that you would, Mayor. I wish that everybody on this call would take, we're about 1 minute from the McNeese Convention Center. And I think that you will be extremely impressed. And I feel that even though we may or may not, depending on whatever you guys want to recommend, take part in an incentivized housing program in terms of affordability, these homes will be offered at a price per square foot that is unprecedented in terms of the quality of the homes. So it's going to afford something for the community that, as we all know, we have a housing shortage right now in San Angelo, right? So I'm not proposing that you help me build Bentwood. but I am proposing that you help me build a vision that is going to, I assume, be repeated and copied in the future, because it definitely is something that's going to be unprecedented, and it definitely will be noticed as something that the city of San Angelo was willing to invest in.
And I would like to remind council that we do have a down payment closing cost program to get people into homes. So we may be able to partner with Lisa on this on that program.
That would be great. And I also am working with a local bank, the Bank of San Angelo, who's funding my project, and they are excited to partner with me in helping to assist with mortgages as well.
Okay. Why was Baptist Memorial willing to let go of these houses?
Mayor, they are redoing their entire community. They have been purchased by a company, a corporation that is separate from how they've been owned before. And so part of that development plan is that they have decided to partner with SKG Engineering to build a brand new community, basically, because it behooves them to do so. So it's a situation where I don't want to call it recycling, but that's kind of what it is. And I would welcome anyone on the council or anyone on this call to tour any of the homes with me. Each one has been identified and each one will be inspected by the city of San Angelo. But I think the caliber and quality of these homes would appeal to anyone on this call. These are large ranch homes, not typical of the area, okay? And I think that these, large bedrooms, large closets, a lot of amenities, obviously they'll have, they'll have all of the features that would appeal to someone interested in buying a single family home in another area. What we're doing is we're encouraging them to move to this area. And I think that my vision complements the vision of the city in terms of the infill incentive program. That is why I'm asking for your support.
Do I have any additional questions from anyone on council? Okay, Tommy?
Mayor, Tommy Hebert, single member District 1. For full disclosure, I also sit on the Board of Trustees of Baptist Memorials. Elisa is correct. This is a win-win, and I did check with Teresa that I do not have to recuse myself from this discussion. This is a win-win. Baptist sees this as a win for them for all the reasons she has stated. They are, we on that campus are undertaking a remodel, a refurbish, and this is a win for us to get these homes into Elisa's hands. They are well-constructed homes. They are nice homes. But it just doesn't fit within the plan that Baptist has on a go-forward basis. So Baptist is very excited that this has come up and able to work with Elisa and hopefully maybe have some other areas around town, even though it may not be with Elisa specifically, but have some other areas around town where a project like this might also be initiated. So, Mayor, with that, if you are ready for a motion, I will make a motion to approve the amendment to the infill incentive program.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Harry Thomas, single member District 3. I second that motion.
With that, we will take a nay vote. Anybody opposed to approving this amendment on this specific project? With none opposed, motion passes 7-0. We will move on to item B. Consider awarding ES-07-20 friction seal for pavement preservation to Pavement Restoration Incorporated in the amount of $679,805 budgeted in fiscal year 2020 and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. Lance, you're on.
Morning, Council, Mayor, Mr. Valenzuela. Hope you guys are doing well today. We have before you today an item on some pavement maintenance that we're asking you guys to move ahead with. And I had a little bit of computer issue this morning, so I'm kind of running on a different system. Can you guys see my presentation okay?
Yes.
All right, so what we have before you today is the opportunity for us to install a new product that we have not done here in San Angelo. It's called Gsb Friction Seal. And so what that actually is, it's an emulsified gilsonite. And so that basically means that it's like an emulsion with asphalt materials with a gilsonite rock. And I know a lot of you guys are probably thinking, what in the world does that mean, Lance? And that's why I kind of just breezed through that really quick. But what that really means is it's almost a mixture between what we have been doing conventionally with the seal coat, added to something that we have already done here in the city, which is the HA5. If you guys have been out to see the HA5, you know that that product has been a very good product. We've done that 2 years in a row now, and we have actually had very good success with it. And what this GSB Friction Seal product does is it uses some of the aspects of that HA5 because it has polymers and emulsions that have to cure out a little bit differently. But what they do is that they actually have mixed that with the more traditional type of a seal coat, so they actually apply a seal coat material or a surface to that, and it actually takes that curing time down considerably. And so how it differs from it, as you guys well know, is that seal coat, which just as a side note, we are starting to apply today with our annual seal coat, is an emulsion liquid that is actually heated up. And so when that emulsion comes out on our regular seal coat, it's a hot mix, it sprays as a hot item, and then very soon after that, then we actually go through and we apply the rock. And as you guys recall with other presentations I've had, that rock on top of the hot asphalt allows that to be drivable within a 30 to 60 minute time period between the start to finish. But what that does do, though, is the traditional seal coat, when we had these 100-degree temperatures in the summer, it actually does reactivate that asphalt material because of the heat. And so that is one thing that we have actually been tasked with recently, is trying to find some different technologies that have a little bit better ride quality, have a little bit different, to allow some options here for certain roadways. Now the HA5 product, how that differs is it's not heat-based, it's more of a chemical suspension of that material. So when it sprays that material out, it actually has to cure. And so what happens is that the water evaporates out, and so over a period of time of about 24 hours, that material actually then cures out to form the surface. And so it does not have an aggregate added to the top of it, but actually has the aggregate somewhat mixed into it very finely. And so that's the difference, is what seal coat versus the HA5 is. And how GSB differs from that is they are kind of combining those two technologies. So what they actually do is that they provide the asphalt mix that's suspended chemically, that gets sprayed down, and then immediately in the same machinery right behind it, they actually add the aggregate, and it's a very, very fine aggregate, almost like a sand. And so that sand goes on top of it, and what that does is that accelerates that time, so that way they can actually have it cured out and drivable within about 3 hours. And so it's almost taking a little bit of both the HA5 concepts, a little bit of the traditional seal coat concepts, and kind of blending that together. And so what you're looking at is that, excuse me, I went backwards there. So here what I have is a couple of pictures of what our seal coat looks like. And so as you guys can see, we spray the oil down. Right behind it, we have a different mechanism and a machinery that puts the aggregate down. And then on our HA5, you can see how that machine basically looks like. It's a single pass. It sprays it on. And as you can see, the picture that does not have the machinery, that's it sitting there curing and allowing that moisture to come out. And then what I have here is to show how that GSB looks a little bit different. So if you see the blown up picture of the machinery, you will notice that in the very front of that machine, you can actually see the darker black material being sprayed down. And then just a couple of feet behind it, you can actually see the gilsonite rock that's being applied. And so what comes out of that product is a very darker material. It does allow access to it in emergency within a half an hour to an hour, but within 3 hours, that roadway surface is drivable. And so as we are continuing to move ahead here in San Angelo, one of the benefits that the GSB has is that it actually has a quite a bit wider range of streets that it can be applied to. And so we are looking at 3 different areas that we're going to be applying this. One is the 14th Street from Chadbourn to Maine. The other one is Rio Concho West. And then the other one is the Green Acres subdivision north of Lakeview Heroes Drive. And so what we're asking you to do is to approve the $678,805 for the installation of this GSB friction seal. And I will tell you that one of the drawbacks that we've had about some of the other products is that they have to be applied to a very much newer roadway. And so where seal coat can be applied to anything, one of the other projects that we have looked at in the last year or two can only be applied to maybe 5 or 10% of our roadways because of their condition. This GSB friction seal actually opens it up because it will actually be able to be applied to as much as maybe 50% of our current roadways. And so it has a lot better range of classifications that it can be added to. And so that's one of the reasons why we're wanting to actually put this pilot program in, test it out, see how well it does. And then we also too will be looking at still other avenues in this year, bringing them back to you for other options for our seal coat. So if there's any questions, I'm open to those.
Who else is using this new product that we've been able to visit with to understand their issues, concerns, or support for this new program?
Sure, Mayor. We actually have visited this being placed in some of our sister cities. Engineering and operations, we actually went to Midland and where they were actually applying it. It is being applied in the Midland-Odessa area as well. We had invitations to go to other locations here in Texas. We chose not to go to those because it would have just been kind of a repeat. But we have actually been seeing it applied, and it has been applied very successfully in multiple locations here in Texas, as well as the entire United States.
Last time we approved a new concept as well. And I know everyone looked at the final product and thought it was really great. Tell me about why we're not using that new concept versus this new concept.
Sure, Mayor. We actually applied that pilot test of the HA5 last year. It was very successful enough that we actually applied a second round of that this year, and that has been completed. And one of the differences that product has is that it has to be placed on a fairly new and a roadway that's in fairly good condition. And one thing that we have seen is that a lot of our roadways are actually already beyond the point to be able to apply that material. And so we are actually looking now at other products that have a similar parameters as far as how it behaves, not necessarily being heat-based emulsions, but having the asphalt mixtures and the polymers. And this GSB friction seal has those same characteristics to it, but because it has the aggregate added to it, it does change how that rock can be applied. And so it actually widens the range of roadways that we can apply this material to. So where the HA5 we may only be able to apply to maybe 5 or 10% of the roadways here in town because of their age and their condition, this product can actually be applied to a much wider range of roadways. It has very similar characteristics in terms of the warranty period, the wear period, and it's just a different product as far as how it's packaged. And if I could kind of explain it in kind of a layman's term, the seal coat product is almost like pouring a hot wax onto something. It actually goes through and it finds those different areas, it seals it off through that, but then heat will reactivate that. These other products that we're trying, like the GSB Friction Seal and the HA5, is almost like pouring a can of paint out. That paint will actually spread and fill those holes, but once it has cured out, it's cured out. It's not going to be reactivated unless you do something chemically to that. And so they're all very similar products in that they are pavement restoration products, but this is much more closer to the HA5 product than it is to a seal coat product.
Do I have questions from council for Lance? Lance, one last question from me. So the finished product of this compared to the finished product of the HA5, I know the cure time on the HA5 was supposed to be 24 hours. Did it really seal up in the 24 hours, or did it require longer time to solidify?
I think that typically we see that it cures out a little faster than the 24-hour period. I don't believe that we had any areas that took more than the 24 hours. And typically they just like that 24-hour period to make sure that it is good and sealed. I know that in some instances that product can be driven on within 3 to 4 hours if an emergency arises. And even being able to walk on it, you can walk on it within a couple of hours. And so I don't believe that the HA5 necessarily took any more than 24 hours. I think on most cases it was less. And what I mean by that is they applied that to, from 7 in the morning up until 3 in the afternoon. And then those streets were opened back up the next morning at the 8 a.m. time frame. And so if anything, they beat the 24-hour cure period. What the GSB is offering, though, is that if they apply something in the morning up until lunch, even up until the afternoon, those roadways can be opened back up the same day for traffic.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Lance on this item? Okay. If not, then may I have a motion to approve the $679,805 for this program, this friction seal program?
Mayor, Tommy Hebert, so moved.
Tommy's motion and a second by Lane Carter. Are there any opposed to accepting this award? With none opposed, motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Council.
Thanks, Lance. Next item is item C, discussion and consider revising the ordinance governing hours for house-to-house door knocking under the infant merchant permit. And we have Teresa James on this.
Thank you, Mayor. Teresa James, City Attorney. This item was requested to be presented today to discuss whether or not we should make any changes to our ordinance regarding solicitation. So I first want to go through what our ordinance currently says. So Julia.
I think she's waiting for someone to do the form.
So currently, we have a solicitation ordinance that's in our Code of Ordinances. And like all of our Code of Ordinances, there is a penalty provision related to that. The hours of solicitation currently in our ordinance are 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. And there is a license required for solicitation and itinerant merchants that are not transferable or assignable and cover only one individual. Next slide, please. There is an application process. You have to file a sworn application with the police department. There's a fee associated with the application as well as for replacement identification cards. And these licenses have to be renewed every 6 months. Now, when we're talking about these solicitation ordinances generally, what the issues that come up are really First Amendment issues. There's a number of Supreme Court cases that say that this kind of activity constitutes speech. And as a result, we have to be careful about any kind of restrictions we place on it. Now, you can place time, place, and manner restrictions even on speech if it's meeting a public need or public concern. What the courts have said regarding the timing of sales is that if you restrict it too much, you're essentially limiting the speech to a point where it's no longer available to people. So currently, our hours of solicitation are that 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. That duration of hours, I'm assuming, was chosen when this ordinance was first drafted because that has been approved by the courts as a valid period of time. Some time periods that have not passed muster are in some court systems, some of the district courts and the federal court system. The dawn to dusk has not been sufficient. Daylight hours has not been sufficient. Anything less than 9 p.m. has been found to be insufficient. And really what the courts say is that rather than placing governmental restrictions on this activity, the best practice is for each individual to place a sign on their house stating they do or do not want solicitation. I even saw a sign during my research into this that said no solicitation unless you're selling cookies, to still allow Girl Scouts to come by houses. So I'm certainly willing to look at any kind of changes we want. I would request, though, if we're going to make any change to our solicitation ordinance, you give me some time to look at the ordinance as a whole. There's been a number of changes in constitutional law that will affect other provisions of this ordinance. It's actually on the list of those to be updated. But with that, I will take any questions.
Okay. Well, I've had many people very concerned about the late hour, someone knocking on their door. And I don't think most people want to put a sign in their front door that says no solicitation. So for me, it should be an 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. time frame. I think that gives everybody plenty of time. Now, if you're telling me from a legal perspective we can't do that, I at least want us to take a look at that and see if it can be approved and not create any legal issues. I just don't think anyone should have to have someone knocking on their door at 8 o'clock at night. I don't think someone should have to have someone knocking on their front door at 9 o'clock at night. I think that's, very intrusive into people's lives. Just as the courts are starting to get more aggressive about controlling robocalls, the knocking on the door is a robocall. And the same people come to your door over and over again and leave their cards, knock on the door, just think it's unacceptable. And so for me, it's about trying to figure out how we can modify it. And for me, it's about modifying the time frame. And so to me, it's 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. That to me seems like plenty of hours for someone to create free speech opportunity and try to sell something. But I'm open to council putting in their perspective or their ideas.
I certainly agree with you, Mayor, but I would say this, Harry Thomas, single member 3, that we've got to comply with whatever the courts are saying. And I don't like it either. I don't want to have to put a sign up that says no solicitation. And I'm certainly tired of the robocalls. I got a half a dozen since we've been on council this morning. I do anything to keep those individuals from bothering this household at inopportune times. But I also know that we've got to be careful that we don't go against what the court says. So,
other comments from council? Tommy?
Mayor, Tommy Hebert, single member District 1. Teresa, is there something that has prompted this that would be helpful for us to know about, or is this just something that's kind of been part of your normal review of different ordinances and so forth?
I've had concerns about our solicitation ordinance for a while because the way that the law at the Supreme Court level has been changing in the most recent years. So it's something that's on my list to go back and review and have my staff look at anyway. The hours issue came to me recently, and I'm assuming it's because, there's a lot of solicitors at doors right now for a lot of different reasons. Yeah. And it's just the time that it came up. But I don't know, Mayor Gunter, if you want to add anything to that.
I would like us to look at that time frame and see if it passes the Supreme Court rules and regulations. And if it doesn't, I would like a recommendation from you about some way we could modify the current ordinance to better protect individual homes from a constant knocking on the door.
And are you okay with us looking at the ordinance as a whole right now and bringing that back? It'll take a little longer to bring it back if we look at the entire ordinance.
To me, it's about the hours. I don't have any specific thing relative to the other items on there. To me, it's about the number of hours allowed. Lane, you were going to make a comment?
Yeah, I know I've got, it's not so much of the actual hours just because of daylight savings and standard time, but it's more, I've got more phone calls about people knocking on doors after dark and that being a security risk. I know during the summertime, the sun goes down later and it's light outside up until 9:30. But in the wintertime, it's dark by 5:30, 6 o'clock. And after hours knocking, people are at home, some people alone, and they're just kind of scared of who's at the door and who's trying to see if you're there or not.
Mayor, Tommy Hebert, single member District 1. Just as input from one council member, Teresa, I would like for you to review the whole ordinance. I am fully supportive of Harry Lane, the mayor, talking about the time frame. I'm a 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. kind of person, so that may not pass muster at all. But I'd like to have a full review rather than you just, if you have concerns about the entire ordinance, I'd like to have a full review, and then you come back with your recommendation, which would include the time. That's just my input.
Any other comments for Teresa before we move to the next item? Teresa, do you have guidance in terms of what we're asking?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay. All right, with that, we will conclude that conversation and we will move into item D on the agenda. Item D is the following: consider resolution allowing the suspension of certain ordinance requirements regarding parking, right-of-way encroachments, and signage during the statewide issued disaster declaration related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have John James on.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an item, as we looked around, and we've seen a number of other cities look at some similar kinds of issues. And so we took a look at basically, as you read, suspending some of the current ordinances just in minor respects, recognizing that businesses have been negatively impacted. What it does is just relax 3 different ordinance requirements to accommodate more flexibility for businesses during this time. The first thing it does is eliminates the prohibition on obstructions within the right-of-way without city council approval. So right now, if you wanted to have like an outdoor seating area like shown in this picture, it would have to come to council and get approval by city council. What this would do, this resolution would allow for an administrative review, so it would speed that up. We would still ensure things like ADA accessibility. You couldn't block the sidewalk such that people couldn't get by. Public safety access, those kinds of things, it would all still be reviewed by staff. It just wouldn't have to go through that extra step of going through the city council. Just a couple of other pictures from some things that we've seen in other cities, some examples of this, both including the picture on the left where you see basically like a downtown sidewalk area, but then also the picture on the right is actually out into some of the parking area in the street. So this would allow any of this, but again, it would have to be reviewed for public safety and all of that. A couple of other pictures again. In the one case on the right is actually closing of a street. Now, I just show that as an example, but actually closing a street, we do have a separate process for that. So if businesses wanted to do a temporary street closure, that is a separate process. The second thing this item would do is eliminate the prohibition on using required parking spaces. So right now, we require any business to have a minimum number of parking spaces. So for example, if they are required to have 30 parking spaces, they can't use those for anything else, whether it's outdoor seating, outdoor display of merchandise. And so what this would do is relax that a little bit. We know that many businesses have reduced occupancies because of COVID-19. And so if a restaurant, for example, can only have 50% of the seating, it makes sense that they don't necessarily need 100% of their parking. And so this, again, would allow, with just an administrative staff review, businesses and restaurants to use some of their parking area either for outdoor display for a retail store or outdoor seating for a restaurant. And again, this would be reviewed by all the relevant departments. Basically, what we currently have is a site plan review committee that would be reviewed. Just some other examples, again, putting picnic tables out in a parking lot. Ideally, businesses would do something like on the right with a little bit of landscaping, some screening and shading for the customers. And even we've had actually one restaurant already approach us about this, putting tent like this in their parking lot to have some outdoor seating. And so we think this would be helpful for those restaurants that may want to do something like this. One thing I didn't mention in both of these cases, The other thing that it does is allowing retail or restaurants expanding into this space. It gives them that extra space to separate tables for social distancing, but also for retail, it gives them more retail space while being able to still accommodate the distancing. And then the third thing this would do is allow some additional temporary signage without having to go through the process of a sign permit. It would be limited to just signs related to COVID specific things like curbside pickup, call this number for delivery, those kinds of signage. We've seen quite a bit of that around town. Technically, a lot of what you're seeing out there is in violation of our sign ordinance. We have not pursued any enforcement on that, but this sort of cleans that up. While we're in this pandemic situation, we would basically waive those requirements for the duration. They would still be subject to any rules that apply to things like traffic visibility or safety. And so if somebody places a sign in a location that we believe is a traffic hazard, for example, we could still enforce on that and have them move that sign. Just a couple of other examples of some signage. These are from other cities. And then as I mentioned, for the first two items at least, they would still have to submit a plan showing the layout so that we could ensure, fire truck access, other emergency access, again, ADA, pedestrian accessibility kinds of issues. And this resolution suspending these ordinances would be effective as long as either occupancy limits or the disaster declarations are in place. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have many comments to make on this. Number one, I support the sign issue in terms of being able to use these temporary signs, because I think people do need to be able to talk about pickup and call-in orders. But I have major concerns about some of the pictures you showed relative to the great pictures, cut and paste from the web, very nice, but they have nothing to do with San Angelo in terms of the width of our sidewalks. And particularly when you're talking about those pictures that you showed, those are historic, almost all those areas are in downtown areas. Our sidewalks aren't wide enough to accommodate ADA and putting tables out like that, so you've got a problem with that. Number one issue in downtown is always about lack of parking. So you cannot take away street parking because that is primarily the only parking that's available. And number three, major traffic issues and accident prone when you start taking people and putting them in parking spots on the street. You're just opening up the door to a major problem with accidents. Because when you start bringing people out into the street, you start bringing kids out into the street, and we all know about kids getting up and running around. And then finally, what we also know is I get numerous amount of phone calls from people that say there's no occupancy limits on outdoor seating, but no one is paying attention to social distancing in outdoor areas. So you've got that as a control issue. So I would say you need to do a lot more work in terms of presenting to council some specifics in terms of how we would look at this, but and parking lots, there aren't that many parking lots downtown. And so again, you got to worry about the amount of parking available. I wonder if you had any conversation with Del Velasquez, who heads up our Main Street program in the downtown area.
I have not, no.
We need to do that. And so I am saying that you need to do a whole lot more work. What you're presenting today is too big picture. Downtown has to be relooked in a different manner than you're going to talk about shopping centers or businesses off of Knickerbocker or Sherwood Way. There's totally a big difference between those and the historic downtown area. And so got real concerns about that. Do I support allowing people an opportunity to do more outdoor to increase occupancy? Absolutely. But what I hear from many people is, particularly in the downtown area, the occupancy issue isn't the issue. In most cases, their occupancy maximums still aren't being matched, meaning many people still aren't dining out. So perhaps that's happening on Sherwood Way, perhaps that's happening on Knickerbocker, perhaps that's happening on Sunset. It's not happening in the downtown area. So I need a lot more direction from you, and specifically on shopping malls, which are owned by somebody, and I think you're going to have to work with that somebody. For example, George Alexander, if you're talking about Knickerbocker, what is he willing or not willing to do in his parking lot? I mean, this is too big picture, not enough specifics. We got to get a lot more detail on all of it, with the exception of the signage issue, and I think the signage issue is very important, and we should move forward and separate that from the rest of this proposal and allow for you to work on the issues as it relates to signage, but on the other, I can't support what you're putting forward.
Mayor, I have Tommy Hebert, single member District 1. I have a couple of questions for John. John, I know you were just using as examples some of those pictures. Can you talk us through a little bit, perhaps, about the approach you all might take to maybe address some of the mayor's concerns, so that maybe we could give you a little clearer direction here?
Yeah, again, this was written broadly on purpose to give flexibility, because we're not sure how any individual business would propose to do this. I think the mayor's right. In the downtown, parking is a concern, and the sidewalks aren't wide enough in most places to allow for some seating area. But there may be some areas where a business could find a way to make that work. Again, we would not approve anything that prevented minimum sidewalk accessibility as required by the state and the ADA. And so they would have to work out something. In terms of the parking areas in the street or in the right of way, that's something that could be removed. Staff kind of went back and forth. I think where we came down was, well, allowing that flexibility would be helpful, but also recognizing there are some concerns. So if that's a concern of the council, then of those three things I presented, taking out the item of the right of way, or at least not allowing it in on-street parking areas, that's definitely something we could do. Regarding the parking lots on private parking lots, again, we think the flexibility for businesses, allowing them to do this, it doesn't require them to do anything, but it allows them that flexibility to use part of their parking lot. As I mentioned, we've already been contacted by one restaurant who would like to put up some tents and establish an outdoor seating area. I think what we've heard from a couple of restaurants is there are people who perhaps are avoiding going out to eat because they don't want to go into an enclosed space, but might be willing to sit in an outdoor seating area. And so that's, I think it's allowing that flexibility. Again, if you all have concerns about specific items you would like to see addressed, we could write that in. Our concern with doing that was basically tying down that as soon as we do that, then some business or restaurant may come in to want to do something that doesn't meet those rules. And then we have to bring it back to you all to tweak those rules. By keeping it broad, we give the flexibility to staff to review it. And as I mentioned, any one of these proposals would be reviewed by Public Works, Engineering, Police, Fire, Planning, Permits, all of those departments that review any development. It would just avoid the extra step of having to take it to a city council meeting.
I can tell you, you just cannot use parking spots on the streets in downtown San Angelo. It can't be done. Too many ambulances, too many fire trucks, too many police. It is a major concern, and we cannot be using the streets for tables, outdoor seating. You can't do it. It's major issue.
And as I mentioned, that specific item could be, we could take that out very easily to remove that particular piece.
And Harry has a comment or question.
Yes, just a couple of comments. I happen to agree with the mayor. Downtown is not the place to try to move some of these things to the sidewalk or to the street. We don't have enough parking as it is. But I also would like to say that I don't want to put the language in there that's too tight. I want to give John and the staff some flexibility so we don't have to bring this back every meeting to talk about it. But I would take out the parking spaces. I do not think that that's appropriate for any of the restaurants downtown. We just do not have enough parking spaces as it is.
Let's do the first thing. I strongly believe that the signage issue is an issue that we could accept, and I think businesses need that. So I think if we separate the signage issue from this and approach it from that perspective, we could do that piece of it. My also concern is I'm not so sure that within a couple of weeks that we're not going to be looking at occupancies changing and going back up again, as well as some other issues. So the timing on this seems like we're a little down the road, and by the time we get this approved in a second reading, we're going to be at a different stage in occupancies based off of Governor Abbott's recent comments.
Mayor, this is Teresa James, City Attorney. This is a resolution, so it is going to be waiving those requirements right now, so it won't have to come back for a second reading. And the way they drafted it is it stays in effect through the occupancy limits and through the declaration. So even if the occupancy limits change, it still retains flexibility for businesses to have outdoor seating during the pandemic, with hopes that more people will come out to eat if they have seating outdoors. So if the governor happens to go on Friday up to 100% occupancy in bars and restaurants, then this would still maintain the ability for them to use parking lots, for instance, for outdoor seating areas where they don't otherwise have it.
Billy?
That was going to be my question, Mayor. If we could allow the signage portion of it and the ability to have outdoor seating, excluding sidewalks and in the street. Because, you know, when we're like out of the box ideas, this in fact may enhance opportunities for some of our restaurant owners that they can do something. And as long as they're presenting it to the planning department and we go through the whole process that John stated of the fire, police, everybody having an opportunity to review this, I guess I don't have a problem with leaving those two opportunities there. Looking at outdoor seating, not on sidewalks or in the street, and also the signage.
Okay, so what we're saying is we're not going to use sidewalks for outdoor dining nor streets for outdoor dining. And we are going to support the signage issues, and then allow people to expand their outdoor dining as long as it doesn't include streets and as long as it doesn't include sidewalks, which are two primary downtown issues. And with that, you'll have to work with individual owners of properties within shopping centers, et cetera, to figure out each individual person's willingness to allow their parking lots to be used for additional outdoor dining. And I think it is great to allow people to expand their outdoor dining as long as we stay within the conversation we've just had. But I want to clarify what you just said, Teresa. So originally we were talking about as long as these declarations were out there and occupancies were reduced, this would only be in play as long as those limitations existed.
Well, these are in place as long as the governor has an emergency declaration in place. So, you know, he goes up and down with his occupancy levels and what restrictions there are. If, for instance, he decides you can go to 100% occupancy on restaurants, but we're still under a health declaration or emergency declaration in the state, then this would still remain in place. And of course, it's only approved by resolution. So if next meeting you change your mind and you want to redo it or get rid of it, we just have to do another resolution, one reading, to remove these loosening of restrictions.
I think this has to be very specific towards the occupancy, not the declaration.
Okay.
Because the declaration is the following: CDC guidelines, wear a mask. we don't want this to be in place when there's a mask order still out there. This is about occupancy.
The other thing that I'd like to point out is we're talking about restaurants, but this applies, I believe, John, correctly, to commercial establishments as well. So people can put displays of commercial goods they're selling outside as well to allow more spacing, as John said, in stores. Is that also prohibited in y'all's thoughts on sidewalks? So having racks of clothes on sidewalks, will we allow that or no?
As long as, again, I think you have the room for ADA guidelines. And I mean, you've got to be very aware of the ADA guideline issue. We cannot allow those to be infringed upon.
And Billy DeWitt, single member District 6, I think we already have that. I don't know whether it's according to ordinance or not, but we already have displays of clothes, racks of clothes on the sidewalk. And I don't know, some of them that I've seen is not necessarily ADA compliant. You couldn't get a wheelchair through there.
Correct.
So wouldn't,
Tommy
Hebert, single member District 1. So wouldn't we be, if we say no dining on sidewalks, wouldn't we be excluding some people that are already using sidewalks today for outdoor dining?
Well, there are some people who have given permission and they pay a fee to put tables outside their restaurant. It is speed driven and they have a permit to do that.
Yes, that's allowed. Right now, in order for someone to do that, they have to come through city council. So that will not change. So if a particular, if you take that piece out of this resolution and a downtown restaurant, for example, thinks they can make outdoor seating work, they still have the option to come to city council and get approval of that. So that's how some of those downtown businesses that already do that, they have already gone through that process through city council.
So they would not be impacted should we exclude sidewalks?
That's correct.
Because they have a permit, Tommy, they paid a fee to do that.
Okay.
And we, in the past, we've been very aggressive about making sure that they have a permit to allow that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, John, do you have the direction you need?
Yeah, I think so. I guess the question is, if your intent is to actually approve this with those changes, or if you want us to bring back a revised resolution at the next meeting.
Is council okay if we say to him the following changes? There will be no no use of streets for outdoor tables, dining, etc. There would be no, unless with a permit in the downtown area, additional tables or chairs because of the lack of width of our sidewalks, that we would allow businesses in other areas to continue to work with you in terms of using sidewalks and or parking lots based off of ownership of parking lots and sidewalks in commercial shopping centers, and that we would approve the signs to be put out for pickup and or orders to go. Billy?
Billy DeWitt, single member District 6. Mayor, you know, that could get so confusing and convoluted. I would suggest that we just let John take what we've discussed here today and then at the next council meeting, bring back the revised resolution. Can we do that?
Sure, we can.
Is that okay with you, John?
Yeah, that's fine. As I mentioned, there is one restaurant that's ready to go with some outdoor seating in their parking lot. They would just have to wait another couple of weeks to do that. But yeah, that's not a concern with me other than that.
All right, so you'll bring it back to us at the next city council meeting. All right, on that, on the next item is 7, follow-up and administrative issues, of which there are none, except if council has any announcements that they would like for consideration for future agenda items. Billy?
Mayor, you know, given all the issues that we're having with Suddenlink, I would like to have an agenda item, you know, in the near future to discuss what, if anything, we can do about this. I am getting so many calls And as I understand, the state of Texas is responsible for the franchise for cable providers. And I know we're sending letters to Suddenlink, but are we making complaints to the state of Texas about what's going on? Can we petition them to, you know, try to get other providers into San Angelo? If we can't, absolutely can't do anything, then I think we need to be upfront. I know we were going to try to get someone in San Angelo. I know we can't have town hall meetings, but we were going to try to get some one-on-one meetings with high-level representatives for Suddenlink. I hadn't heard anything about that, but we continue to get complaints. I do. I don't know about anybody else, but I get an awful lot of complaints and about Suddenlink, you know, just without any explanation, bills going up by $40 a month. People are trying to call in and find out why the increase in their bill, and they're on hold for an hour and a half, and then they get hung up on. So lots of complaints, and I would just like to see us put this on the agenda and understand what, if anything, we can do at this point about our lack of Suddenlink service.
Well, number one, Billy, just to be clear, they're private businesses. And so another company would have to come and say, we decided we want to come to San Angelo and be a part of the cable business here in San Angelo. The state of Texas will not be working with us to find another cable provider. Cable provider will have to choose us in terms of additional service. But what we are doing is sending to the FCC all the complaints, the letters, so that they're fully aware of citizens' negativity towards the service that they have. Daniel, you want to add to that?
Mayor, yes, we have been sending off to the FCC, but also, I know Billy mentioned state, we also have been sending letters to the Public Utilities Commission of the state of Texas. And we do receive them. Initially, we received a couple of hundred. We also did a survey that we had thousands of respondents. You know, they were really upset with the services being received. I know that I did visit with the VP, the new VP, Mr. Horton, with Suddenlink for our area. And he is willing to come down and present to the city council and answer any questions if the citizens may have. And the idea initially was to, once we reinstated the meeting at the McNeese Center, where citizens could actually come in and voice their concerns directly to the gentleman, that we could do it then. Of course, we've been meeting by Zoom. Unless we do some type of we change it up a little bit to where he comes in and talks to us by Zoom, and we may have a list of questions that we could ask him that could maybe satisfy some of the concerns that the citizens have. We may go that route as well, because I just don't see us really meeting at the McNeese anytime soon. So I would say that just invite him to a Zoom meeting. We can develop all the questions that we need and ask him all those questions and see what he can tell us.
I think we need to prepare a list of those questions ahead of time so they have them, and then we can do a Zoom meeting with them, and it could be done as a part of the city council agenda, I'm assuming. But I think we do need to let the citizens know we're following up on all the letters and complaints that they have.
And I agree, Mayor, because right now it looks like, and what I hear from residents is that we aren't doing anything but collecting letters. So I think it would be great if we could have Mr. Horton on a Zoom meeting.
Okay, Harry?
I'm going to follow up on a couple of things that's been said. I agree with Billy. We're getting an inordinate amount, and I'm sure every council member and the mayor, you are too, probably Daniel, amount of these people that are really being put on hold for hours at a time to try to get a resolution on these things. I think if this vice president really was interested in helping us instead of just answering questions, he would find a way to figure out how he can make the customer service better for Altis, for Suddenlink. And you know, basically the people are being told by a lot of these people when they actually have conversation with them, I can't do anything. So, I mean, to me, that means that the company itself is really not interested in helping the customers in San Angelo. Now, I don't know about any place else, But if they can't do anything, then it's really tough for the citizens to feel good about the cable provider. And I can feel the frustration, because I don't go any place or that I don't hear somebody ask about Suddenlink. It's just, it's too much. Having him come in and answer the questions is one thing, but I suspect that that's not going to solve the problem.
Well, we can ask that he be prepared to present to us his plan for improvement on we can come up with 5 key issues, 3 key issues, and say, we need you to come and be prepared to talk to us at a Zoom meeting on the following things. Number 1, quality of service. I mean, we can come up with those items, but I think we need to ask him to be prepared to answer the questions that our citizens have brought to us in terms of all of quality, consistency, pricing, service, etc.
Mayor, we do have a list of the complaints that have been submitted by our citizens as well. We can draw from those the main questions that have been asked, the biggest concerns that have been addressed, and we can prepare to ask all those questions as well directly to Mr. Horton. But I think your idea is pretty good too, Mayor, to make sure that he presents also a plan, maybe also a timeline for those improvements as well. But basically put his feet to the fire and make sure that they are addressing those concerns, and that we actually do have hopefully a solution here in the near future.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
I agree completely. Well, he needs to develop a set of metrics with timelines that we can hold his feet to the fire. Absolutely.
Teresa?
Yeah, I just got a message from Brian that said we have 8,600 responses on our online survey. So that is a significant number of folks. And as Daniel said, we can certainly conglomerate them in some way to figure out what the primary concerns are. But I'll also say that I know that people in other communities in West Texas also have similar concerns. And there's a few of us who were talking about some solutions that aren't government solutions, but that are solutions that individuals can take with regards to Suddenlink to help them get some redress. Because as we all have talked about, the state has taken franchise authority away from us, so we're kind of limited, but there are still individual actions people can take, and we're in conversations to figure that out.
And would we, Teresa, be prepared to share what those individual actions are? Because I have people calling me, you know, their office is not open, so you can't drop your payment off. You mail your payment in, they send it back to you saying it's not an acceptable form of payment. So then by the time they get that worked out, they've got a real huge late fee. Mm-hmm. You know, the least they could do is open their office from 8 to noon so that people that don't primarily operate with checks or debit cards could still pay their bills. I mean, that's a basic, you know, I don't know, I'm really frustrated with Suddenlink, so I apologize.
Right. No, I think I'm not ready at this time to like discuss any of those options individuals can take, because we haven't finished running down those trails yet, but we can certainly do that in the near future.
Daniel,
Man, not only for customer service, but just to get this on record, it's also the speeds that people are getting. If they're paying for the 200, they're not getting it. If they're paying for the 400, they're not getting it. I was even told by one of the Suddenlink techs that don't even bother getting one of the 1 gig, because no matter what you're going to pay, you're going to be doing a speed test and getting it at 400. So, you know, the max that you should ever get is the 400 plan, and you're lucky to even get that. So if they come out and do the speed test,
well,
you're
there's
not getting
false advertising, Lane. That's one of them. The other is the dollar amount. There's a lot of those issues. So everyone's correct. Every one of you, each of you council members have expressed your frustration from yourself to your citizens. We got to deal with it, and let's get a Zoom call organized, but let's get the key questions that we want to ask him for him to be prepared to discuss with us together, so that it's a productive meeting.
We'll get that scheduled, Mayor.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else? You know, one of the items I'd like some sort of an update on as well is the census. we haven't heard anything about what the city of San Angelo is doing in terms of the census count. Could we just have an update? Is there a program, not a program? What is happening with the census?
Okay, ma'am.
Yes, Tom?
Make sure I'm on here. I think we need to do some preparation. Brought this up with Daniel. We need to talk about seating capacities for this fall and winter, what we're going to expect. I know there's a lot of different events and functions. And they're going to use school facilities, municipal facilities, state facilities. We need to kind of go down this line and put a plan, because a lot of these sell tickets and season tickets. And I know a lot of the universities are preparing for a 50% capacity on an indoor event. What are we going to prepare for? And like a thing, I have talked to several people that said, I've got season tickets at different events. What are going to be the regulations we move forward? I just think we need to start a base discussion with, whether that be county, city, or whomever, talking about football games, university games, high school games, everything on what's going to be something that we can anticipate for, Q4 of this year and then Q1 of next year, just kind of to get it out. I don't even know if anybody else has had these issues, but there's a lot of them that have come up that said we need to be looking 3, 4, 6 months out of what we're going to be regulated for.
Good point, Tom. Okay, we've got a lot of homework to do. With that, may I have a motion for adjournment?
Mayor Tommy Hebert, single member District 1, move we adjourn.
And Tom Thompson has seconded that. Anybody denying adjournment? With none, 7-0 passes. We are adjourned. See you next Tuesday.
Thank you.